I bought a 10-foot 4x4 right here, and I bought a 10-foot 2x4. I cut the 2x4 into two 4x6 pieces, leaving about a foot left over, which I cut into two 6-inch pieces. I cut the 10-foot 4x4 in half, making two 5-footers. The mat you see underneath the 2x4s and the 4x4, I bought at Tractor Supply. It's about 3/4 of an inch thick and is really heavy. It's 6 feet by 4 feet. I'll cut it into strips 6 feet long, one 4 inches wide, the width of my post, and one 6 inches wide to lap the other side. The next thing I did is buy a 1-inch piece of PVC. Now keep in mind that's the inner circumference of the pipe, not the outside. The outside is about 1 1/4, closer to 1 5/16. And then I measured it next to my waster, my old one, and it's about an inch, 1 1/4 longer than my Albion Meyer, which is about 49 inches. Now remember to take into account when I drill my holes through my post, I have to add about 5 inches for the angled ones, down for Alber, up for Flug, and about 4 inches for my top one, which will be in oaks. So I'm just going to cut my pieces at about 5 feet. So I measured out my first 4-inch section on the rubber mat, and on the third pass it started cutting all the way through. One way to help cut on that third pass is to pick it up and run your utility knife along your line that you drew on the mat. Okay, so here's my second strip of rubber. The mat, like I said before, is about 3/4 of an inch thick. So if my post and my first strip of rubber is 4 inches, adding 3/4, that's about 5.5. So I erred a little on the high side of 5.5, so I have room to overlap the 4-inch piece. Next, I've got one of my 2x4s and my two short 6-inch pieces that I cut. What I'm going to do is put some Gorilla Glue in between here, and then run 3 2.5-inch screws in from the top through the bottom piece. You could use 4 if you wanted, but 3 should be adequate with the glue. I prefer this kind just because it has a good history, but any kind of waterproof glue is okay. Just a reminder, the 2x4s and the 4x4 that I'm using are all treated. So if you're going to be using your Pell outside, I would recommend that. Otherwise it doesn't matter if you're doing it indoors. Also, just stay tuned for any potential changes at the end of the project. I've got my 2 strips cut out here, the rubber strips. One is 4 inches, one is 5.5. What I'm going to do is drill holes in each side and then weave rope around them to attach them to my post. So the next thing I did is drilled holes through my rubber pieces. I measured off starting at 1 inch from the end, and after that every 2 inches up until about 25 inches. My mark is at 26. This is allowing overlap over the top of my post, which you'll see later. I used a 3/8 inch bit to drill the holes. My cord is 1/4 inch cord. It's pretty cheap at Home Depot or Lowe's, but because rubber stretches when you drill through it, you have to use a considerably larger bit to allow the rope to go through there. Even as it is, you'll have to burn a point onto your rope, your pieces of rope, as you weave them through, and to get them through the hole there, because it's kind of a tight squeeze. So I've woven together my first 2 halves. I'm not saying this is the best way to weave them together, but this is the way I picked. You can kind of see the pattern there. I started from the top, actually, tied it off at the bottom with a figure 8. You could use something else if you like. Wove it all the way around and came out here, leaving plenty of lead. I'm not going to cinch it up the last time until I put it over the post. Oh, one more thing. You can twist this nylon rope through the holes. It is difficult, so sometimes you might want a little stick or a screwdriver, preferably something with a flat end like this. As a screwdriver is pointy, it doesn't quite work as well. So that's the final two pieces of rubber matting woven together. I used a single piece of cord on each corner. That way, as it will wear, as they wear out, they will be easily replaceable instead of putting one piece throughout the whole thing. As you can see, I tied them on the ends. And when it sits on top of the post, it will have a nice bit of cushion and some bounce when you hit it on the head. So I've drilled a hole, 7 it with a 7/8 inch bit, into the end of my post. I've drilled it about 8 inches deep, so I can fit a 1/2 inch galvanized pipe into the post. Remember that when you're measuring pipe, it's the inner diameter that they're listing, so in this case it's 1/2 inch, but you need a 7/8 inch bit to make the pipe fit in there. As you can see, it fits in there. I'll hammer it in there the rest of the way. And then what I'll do is I'll center and drill my holes so that they line up on my two bottom cross pieces, and then the post will set in there. Okay, so I've put my piece of galvanized pipe into my post here and inserted it into the two holes I drilled at the center of my two cross pieces. I've also set my rubber mat that's woven together on top of the post, and as you can see, it sits on here and will provide a nice bit of cushion for strikes on the top of it. What I'm going through now, I left a lot of slack in my weaving, so there'd be plenty of room for it to slide over the post. Now I'm going through and just tightening and pulling all the slack out of it. You can see I left it untied at the top. So I'll pull all of the slack out of the rope and then tie it at the top. Okay, so I finished my lacing and got my rubber mats all secured to the post. I just secured it with about 3 overlapping bowlines on the top. You can use whatever. I did down and then up and then down on them just so they're overlapping, and then just tuck the excess rope into the mat. You can see the post in there. See, we've got lots of cushion on the sides. I made my post 5 feet tall. I'm holding my camera about eye level right now, and of course it's sitting on the 2x4s, so it's a little taller, and I think once you bend your knees and everything, it'll be as tall as you want. Anyone else, I'm 6 foot. I accidentally hammered my pipe into my post a little too deep. If you do that, there's not enough sticking out to go all the way through your second 2x4, and it will tend to just roll off your cross piece. Also, I also erred this time by putting a little too much on there, so now it's a little wobbly because the post doesn't actually sit on top of the 2x4s. So I'm just going to set a 2x4 piece on the end and hammer it in just a little further. The whole idea was to make a portable Pell. While this does break down, the rubber mat slides right off of there easily. It's very, very heavy. The mat itself probably weighs at least 20 pounds, which I did not anticipate. And then, of course, this is a treated 4x4 post, probably weighs another 20 pounds, and then the 2x4s probably weigh another 20 pounds combined, so we're probably talking close to 60 pounds. So while it is technically portable, it may not be that practical. Or in a moment, I'm going to drill my holes in my posts next for my guard positions, and I'm going to use a piece of gray PVC. And then here's my upright post. There's the holes that I drilled for my angles. There's one in the top. That's my oaks, and that's my flug and my alber. We can also see the pipe in the bottom. I reset. I had to put a plug in the hole to make it stick out a little further because I accidentally drove it up in there too far. And then there's my top piece. So now I'll assemble it step by step, and you can see how that. You can see the bottom piece does not have the feet, and then the feet just bring the outside up to the level it should be, so it's balanced. Now I've set my post on the cross piece just by inserting the pipe into the holes drilled in the cross piece. Next, I've put my rubber mat on the top and lined it up with the holes I drilled for my different guard positions. Next, you can see the PVC pipe punched through the first hole, so now that's my oak position. I did make the pipe a little long. It can be adjusted. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I drilled one hole at an angle through the post and then matched it up through the rubber as well, so that I have a flug position. There's Albert. As you can see, I'm using the same hole in the post for Albert and flug. It just comes out over here for flug and down for Albert. An update, a couple of flaws I found in the design. So I made my hole for flug and Albert. That's the bottom part, and there's the top part. It works well in Albert, it's about the right position, but in flug it's a little too high. The point of my imaginary sword or my piece of PVC is floating way over my head instead of at my face. So what I'm going to do, I haven't done it yet, I'm going to drill another hole that's lower. The one other thing, that's more of a preferential thing there, the one other thing that I'm finding that I don't like is the pipe in here allows the post to twist. So whenever I've got my PVC pipe in here, my training sword for my dummy here, it twists every time I hit it. I don't really like that. It feels a little weak. So another update. So due to some weird biomechanical thing, like I said earlier, I ended up having to drill another hole in here to simulate my flug position. The pipe's sticking out a little longer than I normally would, but it's just there for the time being. So I've got my hole here for Albert. It goes down at this angle, and then another hole up here for flug. On second thought, since I have to drill two holes anyway, the next time on future ones I won't drill these holes all the way through. I'll just drill them part way through for flug and probably all the way through for Albert, but by not drilling this hole all the way through, it adds a little strength to my pipe. And then I also drilled another hole at a downward angle through here, not all the way through, but again, so I can simulate a bind and cron. So to fix the twisting motion, I put a couple of pieces there and basically permanently attached my base to my post. You don't have to do this if you're not using your dummy rod. It won't twist around on you. If you're just using it as a standard Pell, the twisting motion doesn't matter a whole lot. The only reason I did that is because it feels weak when I'm striking against my dummy sword. Another thing too, with the PVC, it's a little bouncy. You might consider using a piece of dowel rod instead. The bounciness does kind of offer a little bit of resistance, so it's probably more of a preferential thing. Well, that's about it. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to post them on the YouTube site, and I'll try and answer them as best I can.